Hello, hello. We're back with some more common knowledge, looking at Pauper legal Magic the Gathering cards and seeing if any of these commons are worth it for one of your decks. We'll start with Risen Riptide for 2 and a blue. It is a 0/5 elemental creature, and whenever you cast a kicked spell, this creature has base power and toughness 5/5 until the end of the turn. From Zendikar Rising. No. No is a pretty quick answer here. 0/5 is okay, I guess. You can block a lot of things, but 3 mana is a lot to ask for that. There's the Aegis Turtle, I believe, that's in Foundations right now, and that's a 0/5 for 1. Sure, that it can't become a 5/5 like this one can, but to become a 5/5, you have to cast a kick spell. There are some kicked spells with kicker in Pauper that I've seen used, but I don't think there's enough of them, and I also don't think there's enough of them in blue specifically to really make a card like this worth it. But again, the biggest thing is you're just not going to pay 3 mana for a 0/5. That's ridiculous. Again, Aegis Turtle is a 0/5 for 1 mana, and that also doesn't get played. You need more than that. I guess being a 5/5 can be nice. You could potentially do this at instant speed. You could even attack with this and nobody blocks it, and then you cast a spell and kick it. But that's also spending a lot of mana to do something like that, because not only are you spending the spell, you're spending the kicker cost, which can get pretty expensive when you do that. It's not good enough. It's actually pretty actively terrible. I'll give it a 1.3. I do like the art though. It's nice. Move on to our second card of the day. It's Devout Monk. Oof. Devout Monk is a single white mana for a 1/1 human monk cleric, and when this creature enters, you gain 1 life. It's fine. Fine. It was only in Starter 99, not even in a quote unquote real set. Weird that this card has no black border version. That's not a very common thing. I mean, I guess there's the Portal 3 Kingdoms cards that don't have black border versions either, but that's not something you see in Magic a lot. More importantly, a 1/1 for 1 is fine. It's got an enter the battlefield effect, but you generally want to gain more life if you are a life gain deck in Pauper, or even if you are a deck that is trying to out life gain burn. I believe there's a 2 mana guy that when he comes into play, you gain 4 life, and he's got a better stat line than this guy too. So there's better 1-drops than this in your white weenie deck, or any white deck for that matter. And so he kind of falls to the wayside. He's not terrible though. He's playable. He's just not good. He's not actively bad like that card that we saw the last time, the wave one. So we'll give this a 2. Yeah, I think a 2 is okay, and we'll move on to Bastion Mastodon. It's 5 mana for a 4/5 artifact creature relevant, and you can spend a single white mana to give this creature vigilance until the end of the turn. 4/5 for 5, not a good enough stat line. And the vigilance is nice, but what if this thing just had vigilance to begin with? Don't you think that would be better? It's cool. It's a neat looking thing. I like elephants. I like elephants in Magic. Although elephants in Magic are generally 3/3s, right? The tokens are, I guess. There's a lot of different elephants in Magic, but is it worse than the monk? I think it might actually be worse than the monk. So I'll give it a 1.8. And just say it's a little boring. It's a vanilla creature that can become French vanilla for more mana. Ugh. Yeah. And also French vanilla not with a not with the keyword you want it to have. You want this thing to have trample or first strike or something, like something a little bit more useful in combat. I guess vigilance is okay because then you can block with it. It's got 5 toughness, but I'm spending way more time on this card than is needed. It's not very good. Moving right along to Gitaxian Raptor, which is 2 and a blue for a 1/4 Phyrexian bird. It's got flying, as most birds do. Not all birds, but most birds. And when this creature enters with 3 oil counters on it, remove an oil counter from this creature. This creature gets +1/-1 until end of turn. The best thing about this is that it comes with 3 counters on it. Kind of 3 of any kind of counter, because you can do fun tricks with counters. But I mean, there's some proliferation in Pauper, but what are you getting out of the oil counters? Like, you could make this a 4/1 with flying 1 turn. You can do it at instant speed. That's nice. Like, you could just, like, this could actually wall fairies decks pretty well. You just keep blocking fairies, and then, you know, if you swing in at one point and they just don't block this one, you go, okay, I'll make it a 4/1 until end of turn. It's okay, but it wouldn't be in a fairies deck. But somebody could just lightning bolt this in response if you ever tried to use it even once. It doesn't do enough for you. I guess if you had a proliferate deck that was able to keep enough counters on this thing so it could basically always swing for 4 each time, you're getting an okay deal. But 3 mana for a 1/4 flyer is pretty weak. It's probably the best card we've seen so far today. I'll give it a 2.4. 2.4 seems fair. Hidden Grotto. This is, did we do Hidden Grotto? No, we didn't. We did the Scry one. Hidden Grotto is the better one. There's one from Bloomburrow, and there's one from Tales of Thunder Junction that, Outlaws of Thunder Junction, that are essentially the same card. There's this, and I forgot what the one from Thunder Junction is called, but it's a land that when it comes into play, you get to surveil 1. You can either add a colorless, or you can pay 1 and tap it to add a mana of any color. You can filter it for any color of mana. This is good. This is great. I mean, we saw that Scry land. I forgot what I gave that Scry land, but it was okay. This is just straight up better. It feeds your graveyard strategies. And, you'd put this in your dredge deck. I have this in my dredge deck. I actually think I have the Thunder Junction one in here instead. But I think I might like this art better. Maybe I should just grab a couple copies of this. Because this is useful. This is nice. You can also put this in a Tron deck as a land that filters the Tron mana that you make. The Urza's Tower, Urza's Mine, Urza's Power Plant, and that's okay. The problem is that you generally want your filtering to come through an artifact in that one, because you don't want to spend a land drop on this when you'd rather just play another Urza's land. You'd rather have a Prophetic Prism or something that you filter it into that, and so you can keep making good Urza land drops, because those are the ones that give you more mana. But it's still a very useful card. This is actually a really good card. I like this one a lot. I will give this... I'm going to give this a surprisingly high score. I think I'm going to give this a 7.5. Yeah, I think I'm going to give it a 7.5. This, you should buy a playset of this and just have it, because you'll find places for it. Honestly, you should probably get more than a playset of this. These are very useful cards. 7.5, I think, is honestly probably lowballing it a little bit, but I think it's a really solid card. We'll move on to Mind Raker for 3 and a black. It is a 3/3 Eldrazi processor. It's a creature, obviously. And it's got Devoid, which means it has no color. So even though you're paying black for this, it is not a black card. You could Doomblade this card, which feels weird. feels wrong, but you can. But when this creature enters, you may put a card an opponent owns from exile into that player's graveyard. If you do, each opponent discards a card. This is so I didn't play during Battle for Zendikar, so I don't know how many times you were exiling cards from your opponent. It happens enough in Pauper that because there are graveyard centric decks like the Dredge one I talked about a little while ago. And so you play your Bajuka Bogs, you play your Relic of Progenitus, you play your Fairy Macabres, you do lots of things to get cards out of the graveyard and just exile them. And there's a little bit of exiling creatures as well. There's some cards that will exile artifacts or creatures or enchantments. But what are you really getting for this? You're paying 4 mana. You have to have done a bunch of hoop jumping beforehand to get cards in exile. And then you're giving an opponent a card back from exile to their graveyard. Now you get to choose the cards, so you can just choose a land or something not very useful depending on which deck you're playing. Not an instant or sorcery if you're playing against a fairies, or not a fairies deck, a terror deck. Not a giant creature if you're playing a reanimator deck. So there's things that you get options for, but at the end of the day, it's a 3/3 that sometimes makes an opponent discard a card. And I would just rather play a refurbished familiar that has the same mana cost, though you're generally just going to pay a single black for it because of the affinity for artifacts, and that guarantees them to discard a card, or you draw a card, which is even better. And it flies. It's just better than this. I like Eldrazi. I think Eldrazi are neat. I have a Tron deck that plays a lot of Eldrazi. But this is not in that deck, and it wouldn't be. And I don't really think it has a home anywhere. If you're going to try to make somebody discard cards, you have Hopeless Nightmares. You have, is it Chittering Rats? There's a rat Ravenous Rats. One of the rats comes in and makes them discard a card. You have that Refurbished Familiar. You have lots of things that make people discard cards, and it does it way more efficiently than a card like this. So we'll just give it a 2.1, which is probably too high, and we'll move on. This is not worth talking about that much. We'll get Segovian Angel. This one's interesting. This is a really interesting one. It is 1 single white mana for a 1/1 angel that flies and also has vigilance. So it's 1/4 of a Serra Angel, but for 1/5 the cost. Interesting. You have 4 of these. You've got a Serra Angel that you paid 4 mana for. Sounds like a pretty good deal. Serra Angel feels like it should be in Pauper, but I think it's always just been an uncommon, and I don't see them bringing it down, which is a little sad. I would really like to play Serra Angel in Pauper. But Segovian Angel's pretty cool. It's not the only 1 mana 1/2 flying vigilance that we've seen. There's also a Phyrexian one that's an artifact, I believe. And I think that card is also really cool. This feels like a really cool limited card. I didn't play during Modern Horizons 1, but I feel like it would be rad to just play one of these out on turn 1. That would, oof. And I feel like there should be a Pauper deck for this. Sure, it's French vanilla. It doesn't have an enters the battlefield trigger. It doesn't have a when it deals combat trigger. It doesn't have anything else that it does. But a 1/2 that attacks and can also block all those fairies. I think this card's pretty cool. And it's had the same art this whole time. I like it. I like it more than I should. It's not quite Pauper playable, so it doesn't get the 5. I don't think it goes into a deck unless you can really find the niche for it, and I'm struggling to find the niche for it, but I like it. And so I'm going to give it a 4.7. mostly just from me thinking that it could fit somewhere, even though at the moment it doesn't. I do like it though. 4.7. About that. Aquastrand Spider is from Dissension. I played during Dissension. Good times. It's a Simic card, right? Yeah, Graft was a Simic thing. That's the Simic symbol on the card there in Dissension. So Aquastrand Spider, it's 1 and a green for a 0/0 Spider Mutant. It's got Graft 2, which means this creature enters with 2+1/+1 counters on it. Whenever another creature enters, you may move a +1/+1 counter from this creature onto it. And then you can also pay a green for target creature with a +1/+1 counter on it gains reach until the end of the turn. Reach is being able to block creatures with flying, even though you don't have flying. This is kind of cool. I think this is pretty neat. It's a 2-mana 2/2, which isn't the worst thing. It's not great, but it's a 2-mana 2/2. The graft ability is really interesting. You hardly would use this for this purpose, but the graph says whenever another creature enters, not another creature you control. So you could put the +1/+1 counter on an opponent's creature. Again, generally you're not going to give them counters if you can help it, but there are some cards that sometimes can punish things for having a counter on it, or can destroy things if they have a counter on it. And it is kind of neat to have that potential out of a card like this, that it enables things like that. But what you generally do is you'd put those counters on your own creatures when you bring them into play. So think about this. You spend 2 mana, you put this thing out. This weirdly does not have reach on its own. I mean, you can give it reach because it has +1/+1 counters on it, so it can give itself reach. So it could potentially block fairies or block birds of some kind. Like Coggate's deck, you could block a bird really early. But then you put in bigger and bigger creatures later in the game, and then you can graft and you can move one of the counters from this thing onto that. So you make it even bigger. It's kind of cool. And the idea that you can give one of those creatures reach now is also kind of cool. It's not cool enough to go in a deck. It's a little underwhelming. If this thing could give, there's a whole host of cards like this that will give a creature with a counter on it something, or gives all creatures with counters on it something. I know there's is it a Khans of Tarkir card? I mean, it's in the Khans world. I don't know if it's specifically from one of those, but it's like any creature with a counter on it has lifelink. Any creature with a counter on it has trample, and those are much better abilities than paying for something to get reach for a turn. That puts this out of the realm of playable. But I do like a card like this that starts as a 0/0 and gets counters on it when it comes into play. I also have a Marchesa, the Blackthorn deck in Commander, not in Pauper. And I play that with Arcbound creatures. So they come in as 0/0s, but they all have modular. So they come in with +1/+1 counters, similar to what this would do. And Marchesa says whenever a card with a +1/+1 counter goes to the graveyard, you exile it, and then you can bring it back to the battlefield at the end of the turn. So that's really cool to basically just put up all your modular creatures and just you can let them die, or you have sacrifice outlets to make sure that they die, and then they just all come back because they had +1/+1 counters on it because they enter with +1/+1 counters. And then when they enter again, they have +1/+1 counters again. So you just can keep the cycle going. It's a cool deck. Now that is a Grixis deck. red, blue, white, or red, blue, black. So certainly can't use a green card like this. But there are ways, and they happen in Pauper too, where it's just nice to have a 0/0 creature that has counters on it instead of just having a base power and toughness. If you up this thing's base power and toughness, you have some ability to make something into a 2/2. Well, then this becomes a 4/4 because it starts with counters on it. So it's a 2/2 now, and it has 2 counters. Now it's a 4/4. That could be kind of cool. There's stuff that you can do with this, but are you doing it with this card, or are you doing it with better cards that also just happen to have similar kind of abilities with this? And that's what you're doing instead. So I don't think I gave this a score yet. I'll give this a 3 for mostly the novelty. But I think 3's pretty good. Also, I like Dissension. I just like that time of Magic. Lost Leonin is a 1 and a white for a Phyrexian cat soldier. It's a 2/1 and it's got Infect on it. Infect, there are Pauper Infect decks or decks that use poison counters. They're generally not in white. I think you'll find them mostly in black, blue, and maybe even a little green. White has Infect creatures like this one, but I don't think they generally work in Pauper. There's not enough support for this kind of ability in this color. Even as something that you'd splash into another color, I think you'd rather just splash. If you're in black, you'd splash blue or green, or if you're in green, you'd splash blue or black. I don't think white is what you're splashing into. As just a normal Magic card that you'd play in a regular white weenie deck, it is kind of cool that it's a 2/1 that either trades, or it is nice that if you were playing against, I know I use this example a lot, but if you're playing a Solarian Terror deck, you block a terror with this thing, and it dies, but it also turns that terror into a 3/3 instead of a 5/5. Because this Infect deals its damage to creatures as -1/-1 counters. So that's kind of nice that you can at least chumping with this gets you more than just a turn of blocking, a turn without taking the damage. That's kind of worth it in some cases. But generally, this is not good enough. You do more stuff with that 2 mana, and you just be more effective when you use it with that. But I think there's some hidden tech here. I'm not saying to put it in your sideboards or anything, but it's probably a little better than you might think. I'll give it a 2.9. Worse than the last card, but it's in the same realm. This is it. This is our final card of the day, and it's Cutrub Forayer. This is from Final Fantasy XI. Well, that explains a lot. I have not played Final Fantasy XI. I wonder if this is that a city? Is that a swamp? Is that a name of a swamp in Final Fantasy XI? I've played some Final Fantasies, played a lot of Final Fantasies, but I have not played 11. I'm not an MMO guy, so I'm not sure what Cutrub Forayer is. Forayer, like going on a foray. Forayer? I just keep wanting to say forager, and that's definitely not it. Anyway, it's a 3/2 zombie horror, and when it enters, you get to choose one. You can either destroy target creature that was dealt damage this turn, or you can exile up to 2 cards from a single graveyard. It seems nice, right? These are things that you'd want to do in a Pauper deck. You'd like to exile cards from a graveyard. Lots of graveyard decks out there. You'd like to destroy creatures. Having removal is pretty good. The biggest issue here, it's 2 big issues. One is this costs a little bit too much. Yeah, it's a 3/2. You are getting relatively good stats on that, but it's 3 mana is a little high. And I think the other thing is the destroy effect is pretty weak. You gotta kill a creature that had damage dealt to it this turn. So you're either chump blocking something and then using this, or you're using a bolt or a galvanic blast that doesn't quite get enough damage done, and then you're spending 2 cards on 1. That's not generally a good trade. The chump block is also kind of trading 2 cards for 1, and that's, again, not a good trade. The place this makes sense is if you have some kind of pinger. If you've got like a Prodigal Sorcerer or something that can just tap, do a single damage to something, then you play this. And if you have some kind of repeatable form of damage to creatures, then it's a 1-for-1, which is better. Like that's just a regular trait at that point. And you could, if this was, or even if this was just better, if it could just destroy a non-black creature or something like that, then you could put this in the bounce decks and bounce this back to your hand and replay it. But again, at 3 mana, that gets a little expensive. You generally, the things that you bounce in bounce decks cost 2 or 1 mana, and so it's a little priced out of anything that you'd really want to play in Pauper. And the effects just aren't quite as good. Even the exiling, while it's nice, you generally want to exile stuff at instant speed, so you have that ability to get those cards out before or in response to somebody trying to use some effect to get them out. But Jukabog is great because, well, yes, it's also sorcery speed. It's on a land, so you have much less opportunity cost. You're not losing out on another card that can do something more effectively. The reason Fairy Macabre is a really good card. It also exiles 2 cards from a graveyard, but it can be done at instant speed just by discarding it. You're not even spending mana for that. And that's also a really nice thing to do if, you're tapped out and somebody tries to play their big Reanimator spell thinking you're tapped out, and then you get to exile those cards with the Fairy Macabre. So the forayer here is just kind of weak on all fronts and doesn't quite make the cut anywhere, and so it just doesn't see play. It's not terrible. I think it's like a 3.2. It's which is also its stat line. That was not that's not what I meant to do when I said that, but that is kind of the case. Yeah, a little disappointing one to end on, but I think that's just going to happen a lot. We're dealing with commons here, people, and that's what common knowledge is all about. So until then, we'll see you later.